Hello, and welcome to this episode of Lead with Love: How to Win Your Inner War with Peace and Really Win by Being the Loving Woman that You Are. And today we have with us a very special guest. I know I say this often, but today it is special. Hi, it's Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's such an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. The honor is all mine. I have to say, you, together with my husband, are the wisest people that I know. So,
Thank
so
you.
it's a very special moment for me. I
You're
just
very
watched
kind.
your
Thank you.
interview. Yeah. So I want to jump right into it. First, I want to give you a proper introduction. So Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., he wrote a book called Self-Mastery, or like The Mastery of Self is the right title. And you've written a lot of really amazing books, and you really know what you're talking about. And it's amazing, really spot on. And you're, of course, you're the oldest son of Don Miguel Ruiz, who was the youngest son of 13 siblings, and who was the author of the Four Agreements, which is actually used by the U.S. Air Force. They have engraved it in a coin. So these Four Agreements are really, you guys are legends, right? You really are legends in self-mastery.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you. We
And
do our best with what we've got.
Yeah, and you have an amazing approach from the totem, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correct. Toltec, yeah. And it just seems to be really, really spot on. So I can't wait to get you to help the woman watching with us today. So I'm going to jump right into it because I want to make the most of the time here. How can the woman watching today, how can she love herself unconditionally when she's filled with shame and guilt?
Well, all that shame and guilt was learned. It's someone else's point of view. And of course, we've taken it into ourselves, and whether it be it man or woman, we've learned conditional love. Conditional love is the result of our domestication, or you can call it conditioning, or just simply the way we were brought up. Domestication in our system is called, if you live up to our expectation of what we think you should be, then you're worthy of the reward. And since we are emotional beings with a full spectrum of emotions, from love to hate and anger and whatever else, that reward feels like acceptance, which feels like love, because the punishment feels like rejection and the lack thereof of love. We've learned conditional love in that way. For example, with me, if I live up to the image of Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., who doesn't take things personally, doesn't make assumptions, always does his best. But if I forget that fourth agreement, oh no!
Yeah, really hard to live up to.
How can I call myself Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. if I don't know the fourth agreement? And there's that downward spiral that happens because I'm punishing myself for not living up to that image of what Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. is supposed to be. And the punishment tends to be that judgment, tends to be that guilt, tends to be that self-rejection, because we think that we're not worthy of love because we haven't achieved or lived up to an expectation that we were taught to be. It's neither right or wrong. It's just something that has happened in our life. And that's the very first step, to accept that that's happened. Shame and guilt, for example, guilt is punishing yourself for something you wanted to do in the first place. And we're punishing ourselves over and over, as opposed to remorse, for example. Remorse is when we see that we've done something that's hurt someone else's feelings or emotion, and we see it from their point of view. And that empathy allows us to see, I'm sorry, I recognize what I did, and I own that. That's what I did. I apologize. That's what remorse is, as opposed to guilt. Because if life gives you the opportunity again, you would do it again. And you're punishing yourself for wanting to do it because you're not living up to that image. Remorse is basically seeing it as, I regret hurting someone or causing that pain. I own that decision. I own that choice. And I'm not going to do it again. If life gives me the opportunity to have that choice again, I'm going to say no to it. That's the difference between guilt and remorse. Sometimes we have that guilt and we don't even know what really guilt is, because we're not living up to expectation of mom or dad or society or the boyfriend or the girlfriend or whatever else, because people are trying to domesticate us all our lives. And we've begun to use guilt in that way. And shame is the other one, to be ashamed of this body, to be ashamed of the color of our skin, or my status in society, my financial, economical status, or the way I vote, or it's 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 almost, it feels like a never-ending thing, because we've created so many reasons why we feel that we're not worthy, that we have that shame or that guilt of being this person who we are. So unconditional love starts the moment we accept the truth of who we are. In my case, hello, my name is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. I do take things personal. I do make assumptions. Sometimes I'm not impeccable with my word, and sometimes I don't do my best. Let's ask my wife. She's my witness. It's the moment where I stop pretending to be something I am not, and I accept the truth of who I am. And from that acceptance, well, I choose in which direction I want to go. Do I want to continue to punish myself with guilt? Or do I use compassion and empathy and find out what remorse really is in my life? If I need to forgive someone, if it's in my heart and if I'm ready for it, then I'll forgive. If I'm not ready, that's fine. I'm not ready. My emotions are real and that's how I feel. But
Acceptance.
if I am ready, that allows me to feel that heal. But if I've seen that I've wronged someone, well, I'm going to own my decision. I'm going to ask for forgiveness. Whether they forgive me or not, that's not my choice. It's their choice.
So what
But at
if
the very
it's
least,
you?
I make the steps towards atonement.
What if it's your
And that,
children? Sorry to
exactly.
interrupt.
So that from that point of view, and for the individual self, for your viewers, is the moment where you begin to forgive yourself for ever saying yes forever saying yes to someone else's judgment. My favorite quote comes from Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor said this my favorite quote: "No one can make me feel inferior without my consent."
Mm-hmm.
Which means every time I make myself feel inferior, I've given it consent with my agreement, with my belief. I and I allowed it to impact me in that way.
Okay.
Well, I forgive myself for ever saying yes in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But in order for me to even get to that step, that crucial, important step, it starts with accepting the truth. I'm Miguel Ruiz, or whoever you are.
Honesty. Mm-hmm.
This is what I did. And yes, exactly. The
Yeah.
master being honest with yourself. Because at the moments of clarity, a moment of clarity without any action is just a thought that passes in the wind. But a moment of clarity followed by action becomes a pivotal moment in our life. And it's pivotal because it's the moment where we decide to change direction in our
And
life.
with action here, do you mean honesty toward yourself and others, like saying it out loud?
Yes.
Yes, good. Tell
Mhm.
us more about your grandmother, because I work from 3 steps: honesty, responsibility, and choice. And I know that
Mhm.
your grandmother played a big influence in your life. And tell the woman watching today who really needs to, or gets to, sorry, she gets to practice both honesty and choice. What is the power of choice in relation to your inspiration from your grandmother?
Oh, the power to have faith in yourself, to know that you can do it, not pretend to think, or maybe I can, not to know that you can do it only because you're alive. My grandmother, may she rest in peace, she is the spiritual head of our family. We grew up in a family where we have matriarchs, the matriarch. You know, there's many family in our culture in Mexico that comes from being the patriarch, but in our family has been matriarch. The mothers are the leaders of the family. My grandmother was born in 1910 in the heart of Mexico during the Mexican Revolution, and she grew up in that kind of environment. She had 13 children, and her youngest of the 13, her last 5, went to medical school and they became doctors in their own unique way. And they came from poverty in a small little town. But my grandmother kept through and through, always working, always doing something for her children in her marriages and all that kind of thing. So my grandmother was this fierce force of faith that she had. And now I came into her life sometime in her 60s. So for me, my grandma was always abuelita. She was always this gentle older soul, a very wise sage. And she always taught us, do you control knowledge or does knowledge control you? When knowledge controls you, it's kind of like Eleanor Roosevelt. No one can make me feel inferior without my consent. is when we let our beliefs and ideas and conditions dictate our actions, dictate our choices. At that point, a belief has control over what I say yes and no to. From knowledge, the way she asked me, is the moment I realized that just as just like this body is alive because I'm here to give it a life, I'm not this body. The moment of my last breath, I don't take it with me. My mind is also not me. I'm the force that gives life to both. And at the same time, if I understand that I don't take this body with me, I don't take my mind with me on the moment of my last breath, then my love and every emotion exists because I exist. So my yes is a three-letter word that represents the moment I choose to use the energy that animates this body, that animates this mind to manifest something. The same energy I use to move my legs, to move my arms, is the same energy I use to create a thought. And I can go in any direction because of that. And my no is just as powerful as my yes, because that two-letter word represents the moment where I make the choice not to use the energy that animates this body to manifest a single thing. My no is just as powerful as my yes, and nobody else controls it but me. So from that point of view, my grandmother taught us is to have faith in yourself, to make those choices, to follow through on those choices. No one can make you feel inferior unless you give them permission to make you feel inferior.
Mm-hmm. So listen
And
to
from that
yourself.
point of view, yeah, and this is a woman that, you know, went from Mexico to the United States. She passed away as a U.S. citizen. She raised 13 children, 64 grandkids, and
Amazing.
many more since that. But she was a woman whose faith was so strong, she helped people heal with themselves with their own faith.
Wow.
So what I would say that in the spirit of my grandmother, because I don't follow, many people think that I'm following in my father's footsteps, but I'm not. Both him and I are continuing my grandmother's footsteps. It's her vision. It's her dream to do what we're doing, to share her father's and her great grandfather's teachings in our unique way. But it always starts with that first step, and it requires that faith in yourself to make that first step. At that point, there's a teaching that another great teacher once taught me, and I don't remember her name, but I remember the moment she said it. The key to enlightenment is effort. That's it. That's what she
Is
said.
what?
The key to enlightenment is effort.
Yeah.
Well, in my life, effort is using that energy to move my body, to move my mind, to create something.
Mm-hmm.
That's what effort is.
Yeah.
So discipline is just remembering to use the energy that animates this body and my mind to create something. And
Yeah.
success simply is following through on that effort. And that's
Feel
the
and
beauty of
recommit.
it all.
Yeah.
That's exactly what my grandmother taught us, to have faith in yourself, to make the choices in your life. And the question is, are you going to let someone else tell you, or are you going to make it for yourself?
Yes. Don't
And
doubt.
and sometimes in our life, somewhere in our life, we discovered that all our doubts and fears were someone else's point of view. That shame and guilt that we talked about before,
Mm-hmm.
that was also someone else's point of view.
What if we really feel it's in ourselves? Like, say you hurt your children. Like, I've done things and I can see
Mm-hmm.
the visions in my mind. I'm going up the stairs and I'm like, post stress of I just screamed or lashed out. I snapped. And they're like, really?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to
Mm-hmm.
share something, or I want you to tune into something you said to Louis about forgiveness. So say you're like me, you
Mm-hmm.
like you literally choked your son, right? Total shock, or you did other crazy things, violent, aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked to Louis about every moment has a million opportunities, and I love that. So how can the
Yeah.
woman watching today use that knowledge to practice forgiveness and forgiving herself?
Well, first about forgiveness, it's all about being honest with yourself, like we were talking about before. If
Mm-hmm.
you're not ready to forgive, you're not ready to forgive, and that's fine. We're emotional beings, and our emotions are going to take us in different directions in life. That's what I was talking about before. It's like it can go in any direction. All you have to do is just think about it. But once we've taken the action, and sometimes we've given in to hurt or anger, like as a father myself, There's moments where I've crossed that line where my anger got the best of me, but
Mhm.
luckily it didn't get the best of me beyond that. So I've learned from that lesson. I've learned that mistake. All right, do I want to experience that ever again? No. Do I ever want to yell at my kids like that? No. Is that even going to teach them anything? No. What's going to teach them? To let them experience the consequences of their own choices. That's how life teaches us. To experience the consequences, good, bad, right, or wrong, is how we learn. If we didn't like a consequence, we won't repeat it. So, in our life, to be gentle with ourselves is to, in those moments where we've learned a lesson, we can beat ourselves over and over and over again. But the only true lesson that really has impact is the one that informs our choice. And in that moment of choice, if we see that my anger and my emotions is going to get the better of me, like my grandpa used to say, my lip, make the choice not to let that emotion dictate. That comes from paying attention to your own reaction, to your own past, not necessarily judging yourself, because sometimes judging yourself doesn't really teach you anything. It just means you're using that to berate yourself and make yourself feel less than. To
Mhm.
learn from a lesson is just first accept it that it happened. Someone taught me this beautiful line about forgiveness. Forgiveness is the moment you no longer wish the past was any different. You
Mhm.
accept it the way it
Yeah,
happened. When we get to that place,
really good.
we're no longer wasting our energy trying to think of ways to try to make the past look different or spin it. No, we accept it. It happened.
Yeah, moving on.
Now, because it happened, now I'm going to choose to teach me, to learn what triggers me to react. Now I become aware what triggers me to get angry, what triggers me to react, what triggers me to lose self control. Because whatever triggers me is exactly the wound that hasn't been healed.
Exactly.
It's exactly the thing, the belief that continues to control my actions. So I look at an emotional reaction, like my emotional body, like a car alarm. When you put on the alarm of a car and someone touches the car and the car goes beep, 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 beep. Well, that's the alarm. So in my body, whatever triggers me to react, it's my body letting me know, exposing an old wound, an old belief, an old idea. It's what awareness does. Awareness allows me to become aware of it. Now it's exposed and I have a choice. And the choice is this: to continue to believe it or not. If I choose to no longer believe it, all right, let's look at it. Let's put a process. How's that impacted my life? And if I see that how it's impacted me, then I can forgive myself. But I can't do that without me becoming aware of how that's impacted me. So it's all this journey. But my emotional triggers are exactly the catalyst that allows me to be aware what I need to work on. And by little, with practice, that trigger will have less and less power.
Exactly.
You can say that,
Practice.
yeah, practice
Fail
makes a
and
master.
recommit. Practice. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and just willing to learn. And little by little, I won't get triggered by it again.
Mhm.
And
And
sometimes it just is a matter of remembering. Oh, if I take it personally, for example, there's a bit of a hangover that I don't like emotionally. Yeah, I'm not going to take it personal.
yeah. And also what you said about every new moment has a million of possibilities, because then we don't get stuck in the past, because we tend to focus too much of where we don't want to go, except of let it instead of letting go. So
Hmm.
realizing the part about every second having a million new opportunities to not look backwards and reinvent and
Hmm.
recreate what we want to avoid.
And the thing about the past is that life no longer exists there, and we spend a lot of time there because it's what we know. And the future, we don't know it, of course. We don't know where it's gonna go. We don't know where it's gonna take us. But we can learn from our past experience to give us a little bit of a hint and be ready to what comes around. It's the future. Well, the future is in our imagination. We live in this present, and just like a musical sheet that goes around and around, the future eventually becomes our present. So the future only exists in our imagination, and the present is exactly where we live. But if we put our attention in the past, then we're not living. We're stuck in a moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes we obsess on it because we don't want to let go.
I want to remember this question because I love your answer to it. What do you think? And this is also about, powerful women living out their full potential, but not doing it yet because they haven't won by being the loving woman that they are. So it's really their disconnect to being the loving woman that stands in the way of them living out their full potential. And so what do you think is the number one thing that holds the loving woman watching with us today that stands in the way of her living out her full potential?
Well, the question is so general. Like there's 7.5 billion human beings living in life. Divide that by 2, and you have 3.75 billion women. If we go 50-50, we're talking
And how
about a
many really
lot of people.
powerful, strong?
And then,
It's a woman that people
yeah,
look up
and
to as a Wonder Woman, but she knows she can do so much better. I don't know
so
about
instead of me saying what is that one thing, I'll say, you woman, you individual, you human being,
Yeah.
stand in front of a mirror, look in yourself in your eyes, and be honest with yourself. What is holding you back? Because if you're asking me to answer that, well, I'm seeing it from someone else's point of view. I'm seeing it from an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's guilt, sometimes it's shame, sometimes it's society, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. But in reality, it's you. And who is going to know you better than you? Who's going to give you that answer but you? Ask me that question and I'll say it for me, but it may not be the truth for you. But what it is truth for you is
Truth.
you. So look yourself in the mirror. Ask yourself, what is the thing holding you back? Is it fear?
Yeah.
Is it a fear of responsibility or commitment? Is it a fear of failure? Is it a fear of like not knowing the knowable, that you prefer to stay in what you know? Is it that because you really believe in those limitations someone taught you? Is it because you're really not feeling good and physically, emotionally? You're not in a comfortable spot. You're letting anxiety kick in. Are you letting your old love get in the way, or you just simply, well, etc., etc.,
Yeah.
etc., etc. It's
Good point.
it's as important as the individual getting to know yourself. So the question there was, what's holding you back? I can't even say fear, because that might be true for a very, very small percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people really don't want commitment. Some people really want commitment. Some people really like the thrill of the chase, the adventure. Some people really don't like it. They prefer to stay at home and have a cup of tea. That's what makes us unique. Um, 7.5 human beings living life at this very moment. So the question for you is to be honest with yourself. What is holding you back? And more importantly, what makes you happy? Because in life, there's always a motivator, something that makes us drive to create something. Because yes, we can go in any direction in life, but what's going to make us want to do it? And for me, that's passion. Passion in our life of what we want to create, what we want to enjoy. Obsession versus passion. In domestication, obsession is trying to live up to an image, trying to live up to expectation, trying to chase that elusive image of success,